So we're going to get started. The first on the agenda is Miss Tiffanny Hammond. So take it away, Tiffanny.
Hello. Okay, I'm going to be singing I Wish I Knew What It Would Be to Be Free by Nina Simone a cappella. Yes. Hopefully I do it justice. Okay. I wish I could know what it feels to be free. I wish I could break all the chains holding me. I wish I could say all that I should say. Say it loud, say it clear, for the whole round world to hear. I wish I could share all the love that's in my heart. Remove all the bows that tear us apart. I wish you could know what it means to be me. Then you'd see and agree that every man should be free. And I wish I could give all that I could give. I wish I could live how I'm longing to live. I wish I could do all that I could do. I'm not way overdue. I'm gonna start anew. And I wish I could be like the bird in the sky. How sweet it would be if I found out I could fly. I'd soar to the sun and look down to the sea. And I'd sing 'cause I know. I'd sing 'cause I know. I'd sing 'cause I know what it feels to be free.
So my name is Erin Jones, and I started my teaching career here in Tacoma 17 years ago. I'm now an administrator for the superintendent here in Tacoma. And I'm the mom of 3 black children, the wife of the younger brother of Jesse Jones, King 5 News. So if you ever see Jesse, you'll think of me now. Anyway, but how I think about the day after the shooting, and my 3 teenagers are 17, 18, and 19. And my daughter was headed to college a week from that time. And I'll never forget, her dad actually was involved in the first drive-by shooting here in the state of Washington. Her mom started the Hilltop Crips. So we've had a lot of history of violence in our family. And so my kids have been aware of things that they probably shouldn't have been at a really young age. And I'll never forget, we talked about it the day it happened, but the day after I found myself, I get up and play basketball every morning at 5 o'clock, and I got up at 5 o'clock and she was awake, which she never is, and she was on the computer. And she's just scrolling through all the news about the shooting, and she's sobbing. And I said, honey, what is going on for you? Because she typically doesn't follow anything in news. And she said, I'm 18. He's 18. I'm going to college next week, and he was supposed to be going to college next week, and she was just overcome. I have 2 giant black boys. My youngest son is 6'4", 290. Yeah, he's kind of a big kid. Sweet as all get out. 3.7 GPA, 11 APs, highest SAT scores for a black boy in the state of Washington. Brilliant kid, but he's still 6'4", 290. And he's been pulled over by the police on his bicycle. My other son is 6'2", 240. He plays rugby at Central right now. He's been pulled over on his bicycle. Neither one of them have ever gotten in trouble, but I have to have conversations with my children about when you get pulled over, not if, but when you get pulled over, here's how I need you to interact with the police. Now understand, my baby son, the 6'4", 290 kid, also has Asperger's, and he has no filters. He's brilliant, but he can't stop talking. And no matter how many times we walk through the scenario, I have to remind him every time, you cannot talk back. And he's not a talk back in the sense that he would say something mean to a police officer, but when he's being accused of something that's unfair, he will stand up for himself, and he doesn't understand why he can't, which is a great thing in his AP class. Not so great when he's standing over a police officer. And so as a mom, as I've watched this whole situation, my heart is broken for my own children. And here's what I'll tell you. My son could go to Harvard. That his scores are good enough to go to Harvard. I won't send him to the East Coast. I can't. As a mom, I can't send my kid to the East Coast. He's going to stay here on the West Coast because I don't want to lose my son. We've worked too hard to get him here. And that's how it impacts me as a mom, but it's not just that. When I think about Tacoma, I see moms in here of kids that I've had over the last 17 years. All of these kids are in crisis. It's not just about my son. It's about the other sons and the thousands of other children in this community and others who now we have to be in fear for their lives. I believe kids are dying every day in our schools. I believe dropout is actually push out, and I believe it begins the first day of kindergarten. And so what does better look like? Better looks like acknowledging that and actually changing what we're doing. Not asking the kids to change, but us as a system saying, you know what, we're in crisis. Let's not wait till we have a riot. By the way, there is a riot right now. By the way, kids are dying in droves. By the way, lots of our black boys are being locked up. And I was just telling Chris, we're like one of the top 5 states in the nation, percentage-wise, for incarcerating black men. Yet we're only 6% of the population here. But that starts in public school. It starts when kids are expelled. In a district I was in recently, we had a 5-year-old expelled. How do you expel a kindergartner? How do we make things better? We change how we talk about our young people. We talk about them in the asset-based language and not deficit. We stop using words like minority and dropout and achievement gap. And we talk about how do we hold ourselves as a system accountable. My number one charge, I feel like, is to get every single administrator, every single teacher in a classroom, every paraeducator, every security guard to see every single child as gifted. And that is, it's powerful because when you can see kids as gifted, you raise your standard for them. And it changes how you instruct them. It changes how you interact with them. And so when I think about the students that I've had in my 23 years of teaching now, I have 2 gangbangers, actually 2 former gangbangers who, one just graduated from Whitworth on a full-ride scholarship. The other is an officer in the Navy. And I think about part of the reason they were able to do that is not because they've always been brilliant. Both of those boys have always been brilliant. They've always been gifted. But it was somebody telling them, hey, here's a mirror. You're gifted. You're brilliant. And they bought into that. But I think too many educators say, oh, it's those kids. They live in those apartments or that neighborhood. And that discourse has to change, and that's part of my role as an administrator is at that level, as I'm in buildings, challenging educators and saying, you know what, if you can't believe that every single child can learn, you probably need another job. You need to be doing something else.
My name's Chris Jordan. I'm a student at PLU, and I'm a teaching artist with the organization called Fab 5. We need to start talking about what it means to be anti-racist, what it means to work against this, because if you're not working against it, you are complicit in it, you're a part of it. Racism is not a matter of being, it's a matter of living, it's knowing, it's believing, it's ignoring. It's every conversation that you have not had with your children. We need to talk about race and race issues in our families. We can go to these demonstrations and we can go and we can say, we can be a part of it, right? But we need to ask ourselves, how am I demonstrating in my relationships? How am I demonstrating in my family? How am I demonstrating at my home, in my church? Who's represented in my job? Who's on my staff? Where is diversity there? Where is equity there? we need to ask ourselves, why is colonial history is the modern history of our planet? Like, why is that not addressed in our schools at every level at public school? So I just want to challenge everyone to be thinking about that and to look into their packets that Tasha handed out and really reflect on how can I be anti-racist in my job, in my family, and my work. I'm going to address white America and allyship. There's a Chris Rock quote that's really interesting. He talks about this notion of that black people have made progress in this country. And what he says is that black people haven't made progress. Like, this has not been black progress. Having Obama as a president is not black progress. Like, white people have made progress. Black people are not the source of racism. Black people have not been the problem. There have always been black people who have been eligible for presidential candidacy and for all of this leadership at every level. There's black people who have been eligible to be mayors for generations in the city of Tacoma. Like, all of that. White people have made progress. What I say to that, though, is that it's time to dig deeper. If we look at this as a measurement of the progress that you've made, it hasn't been enough. Mike Brown is dead. That progress wasn't enough for him.
My name's Nicholas Bradford. I'm the founder of an organization called the Restorative Justice Center of the Northwest. I do a lot of work around discipline, primarily in schools, and looking at kind of how we deal with harm in our communities. I was thinking about my work, and in conflict, we talk about, this is not about right and wrong. It's about the impact of your actions. We talk a lot about accountability and lawyers, and I come from a little bit different kind of perspective on the fact that, like, it is important for us to work together. This is a community. Tacoma's a community. Pierce County's a community. Things aren't going to change if I come at them. I can't get peace through the end of a gun, nor at the end of a rock or whatever. And so how do we make that happen? And compassion for me is in the face of really significant harm and conflict, how do we deal with that? And think about, like, your experience when you're in conflict with somebody that you love, right? Your family, friends, even your coworkers. Like, when conflict happens and it's emotional, it's intense, and it feels raw. And this is, what happened is on a totally different level than what we experience on a daily basis. But when you deal with conflict in an emotional, when you deal with that conflict with people that you love, you do it differently, right? You just, you want to understand where they're at, where they're coming from. You want to be understood, right? And that's what I see these two groups of people doing, right? Our communities of color, police officers, they're just in conflict, and they want to be understood. But the way they're communicating is not conducive to that. So I think about relationships, and I think about how do we build a relationship between communities of color and the police force and the other systems in place, the school systems that have really clear disproportionate effects on communities of color. So for me, I think about, this is just my first reactions was, how do we facilitate a conversation? Because this community of cops doesn't feel like they are a part of our communities, right? And I don't feel like they're a part of our communities. I have a lot of police officers who are friends. I don't find them, like, engaging our communities and coming to events like this. Maybe there is a police officer here. I don't know. So for me, and I'll finish, is how do we have a conversation about that and address those issues and tell communities, other communities, schools, and police forces, this is what we see and this isn't okay. What can we do to support you to address these issues that are clearly present? That's all I have.
Keith Blocker.
Thank you. So when I think about what were my first thoughts
after hearing the Ferguson verdict. Honestly, I wasn't surprised at the outcome, and that's just me being realistic and looking at how everything played out, how the grand jury was dealt with, how the gentleman Bob McCullough handled this whole situation. It just all seemed as it was leaning towards this outcome. And just thinking about the history of America and looking at the history of racism and the systematic oppression of African Americans and other people of color and throughout the country, I wasn't shocked at this outcome. With that said, it was, at the same time, it was heartbreaking. It was, here we go again, same old story. One more thug is gone. And that's the justification to take away a young man's life, is that he was considered a thug. And that's just wrong. You know, so many young people out here who just have struggles, who just need support, who need some kind of assistance that can help guide them in the right direction. But yet we want to demonize them and make the victims the enemies and make the victims the violators. And that's something that we need to address, something that we need to correct in the society, and it's something that we need to have a great dialogue about. America has a history of dehumanizing people of color. Racism is a system that was designed to maintain a hierarchy, putting whites above all other people of color in America. That is the origins of racism in America, and that's the way it stands today. So this idea of reverse racism is just ridiculous. You know, it doesn't exist. You cannot create something that has an origin and somehow in the past, 40 years since the Civil Rights Movement, all of a sudden people of color are racist towards white Americans. And the fact that people of color speak out against their own struggles and their issues in their community and how oppression affects them makes them a racist, like, that's ridiculous. And it's something that we need to stand up and speak out against every time you hear these notions of reverse racism. If you look at the disparities in America, you don't see reverse racism. You see racism doing exactly what it was supposed to do, which is to create a hierarchy which allows certain people to gain access to resources in America while others don't. If you look at our school systems, if you look at our prison systems, if you look at our healthcare systems, all these things show great disparities that affect people of color. And that hasn't changed in the past 40 years or 100 years. From my perspective and from my experience, it's been the black males have the highest dropout rates, highest gang activities, least likely to go to college. But again, when you start talking about resources to address these issues and help young people move forward, young people, we're talking about children now, the resources get taken away for the sake of all children. But apparently all children aren't the problem. So when we could get to a point, and it's a culture of this inside of the state of Washington. State of Washington took away affirmative action, another resource that was designed to help people of color gain access to resources, taken away. So a better Tacoma to me, a better Washington state to me is an equitable Washington state, is an equitable Tacoma, where we recognize that if there are problems and we are able to identify a particular group that is the main cause of the problem, when are we going to allocate the resources to address these issues? Where is the uproar when this happens? You know, and it happens and no one says nothing. Maybe a few people step up and say what's going on, but then the resources are taken away and the students who are the problem students are back to square one again. So we need to step up So when I think about my career, my future in Tacoma, I'm thinking politics. I'm thinking of getting engaged in this system. I'm thinking stepping up and inspiring others to step up. This is our right, and we can do that, and we don't have to wait for people to tell us we can. So thank you.
Hello, my name's Jasmyn Jefferson. I'm a parent. I don't have a background in nonprofit. I work in the private sector. My feelings on the Ferguson verdict, I think, are echoed. I wasn't surprised. A lot of talking took place in my household. I have a daughter, she's grown. Talked to my brothers, my dad, talked to my daughter about her brothers. A lot of weeping by myself. I'm not an activist by choice, but I feel like the peers that I am with, there is a lot of us who want to make a difference, and it is my obligation to continue to insert myself into the community, whether people want to shut me down, whether people want to stop me. So it's our job while we're out doing the things. If you see something, you have to speak up about it, and it's those little things, the compound effect. My observations are not as great as the people doing this wonderful work, but the little things, if you feel overwhelmed by going and taking over the school district or, you know, some of these nonprofit organizations that do tremendously great work, I just want you to know there is room for everybody to make a difference, and that compound effect is immeasurable. What I do hope is to have more people engaged. If you don't know where to get started, it really is not that difficult. Standing in the shadows is not helping anyone, so that's why I'm doing this for the first time, and I want to thank Tasha for doing this. The legacy that I want to leave my daughter is at risk of just being normal. If I want her to be remarkable, I have to be remarkable. So that's why I'm here today.
Hi, my name's Kit Evans. And when Tasha asked me, I said yes, because that's what I was taught. My biggest fear initially, do I talk down into it? Yes, my biggest fear initially was I would say some stupid white thing. I'm serious. But of course, I reminded myself, well, I am white, that's how I identify. And I have been known to say stupid things. So I needed to get over that. One of the ways I got over that was I thought about my boys, and I'm pretty sure they will come home tonight. And so I thought, well, my fears are relatively unimportant. And I too, I want to stand up. I want to insert myself, and I want to be there. My second greatest fear I took to my staff, and I said, I'm afraid to go talk tonight because there's a word in my mind that I can't get out of my mind. And that word is genocide. And I can't go to this room full of people and not be harmonious. And they just said, well, do you think it's true? And I said, yes, I think it's true. And they said, well, then talk about it. So I guess I'll say what I feel, which is that the Native Americans, it's very clear it's been genocide. There's almost none of the tribes left that were here when white people got here. But as I was thinking about that, I thought about African Americans, and I started connecting the dots. And it may look somewhat different, but the complete disruption of the economic basis, the ability to put together a home, a job, a household, over and over, African Americans have built that, and over, the system has taken it away from them, again and again. If you haven't read The Atlantic, the article on reparations, the case for reparations, it's brilliant. You must read it if you're going to be alive to what's really going on in the deeper levels of things. It's online, it's free. It says on the cover, 250 years of slavery, 90 years of Jim Crow, 60 years of separate but equal, 35 years of state-sanctioned redlining, until we reckon with the compounding moral debts of our ancestors, America will never be whole. It's written like a story because it is a story, and it's something that you can read all the way through, but you keep stopping to cry You keep stopping to cry. There's no way around it. So I urge you to read that. I believe that genocide does not always include the mass incarceration. It does include in this case, but the wholesale murder of everyone. But it's like the drops on the forehead of Chinese torture. That's not the same as immediate drowning someone, but after a while they go crazy. Don't we all think we're crazy when we hear this stuff? We're going like, that can't be so. Drop, drop, drop. Oh, it is so. Drop, drop. Yes, it's so. And at some point, people burn their own buildings. One of my staff said to me, when I complained, the first white person I talked to, I said, what do you think of Ferguson? They looked at me in complete innocence, open face, and said, well, I don't understand. Why are they burning down their own buildings? And I just looked at this person. And my staff person, my youngest staff person, when I said, what do I do with questions like that? She said, remind them of self-immolation. Remind people what you do when you're completely out of options and your rage makes your head want to blow up. So I just wanted to bring out that there's something deeper going on. I don't think the word racism can encompass what's happening in America today. I really don't think that's a big enough word. It's a convenient word to talk about, oh, we have this problem and that's what we'll call it. And we can have classes on diversity to do something about it. We have public policies and laws that are demeaning, that are cruel. Oh, the little cruelties make me nuts. And those are on the books, and they continue to debase and degrade and destabilize a huge part of our population. And we have deep, deep work to do. And part of that's going to be recognizing in each other and understanding the truth of this. A good Tacoma would look like people being really accountable to each other, not by asking you to come tell me how it is, but me going to find out everything I can and then coming to you and say, am I making progress here? Can you talk to me? And the last thing I'll say is that when we're in a room and somebody says things, then I'm glad there's nobody of color in the room because of what was just said. Speak up. We have got to speak up.
Hi, I'm Troy Christensen. I'm Chief of Operations and Strategy at the Metropolitan Development Council, just a block up the street. Is Philip Cowan in the room somewhere? I know he's our host. Okay. I just wanted to thank the Grand Cinema for hosting this event. So my first reaction, I don't know if any of you went on the New York Times website, but they actually list practically everything from the trial, or I guess it's not really a trial, from the indictment hearings. And first off, so the question is, what's our personal reaction? My personal reaction, and I'm not an attorney, but I thought, why did they go for an indictment instead of charges? Secondly, the prosecutor's supposed to prosecute, and they set it up from the beginning so that they were going to get this verdict. He didn't even say, I need you to indict him. He just said, I know you'll do the right thing. If you look at his questioning of the people, and maybe all of you know this already, but the way he questioned the witnesses, he treated them as hostile, and he handled the officer with kid gloves. And that's not what a prosecutor's supposed to do. By definition, it's an adversarial system, and the prosecutor is supposed to prosecute. So in my opinion, there was a second crime committed, and someone should be held accountable for that. I appreciate what Erin says. I know parents of color do this, and I don't know where the victim's parents were on guiding him about what to do in the face of a white police officer, especially if you're a large black man. And I get it that, I never had to think about that. I didn't have to tell my children about that. Kate doesn't have to worry that her kids aren't going to come home tonight for that reason. Erin does. She has to. Every black person in this community, in this country, has to do that with their kids. That's because of the way the system is. It's not because of individual racism, although I'm sure that's there as well, but it's because of a larger systemic system of racism. It's like giving socks to a person who's homeless. You tell your kids, be careful if the police approach you, but it doesn't fix the problem. Socks don't actually make a person not homeless. Teaching your kids how to not get shot by the police doesn't change the system. It's a necessary requirement right now, but really what we need is change. And change probably isn't going to happen with the choir together in a room having a dialogue. It may build us some energy, but what we need are leaders of color and white leaders in this community to come together and say we have to have some changes in policy around law enforcement, around education, around health care, around criminalization, around criminal justice. And we need to do that all across this country. I'll just throw out one statistic because I've been working in homelessness for a number of years. And for white people, when they hear this statistic, they look really confused, like they don't understand it. African Americans represent 7% of Pierce County's population. They represent 28% of those in Pierce County living in poverty and 35% of those experiencing homelessness. And if that's not institutional racism that shows up in real life disparity with the things that matter most, like being able to care for your family and being able to get a good night's sleep, I don't know what is. And so for people to continue to say that it doesn't exist, we need to make sure that it's in their face as often as it needs to be till they have an aha moment. Now is the time for us to step up and say, we need to make change. They've just created at the City of Tacoma a Department of Equity and Human Rights that didn't exist before. There's a reason that they're doing that, and it has to do with more and more leaders at the city understanding that this is an issue for our community and an issue that requires change. And it's up to us as a community and us as leaders to pull together and demand that change, because it won't happen without demanding it.